My name is Wendy. I'm 34, a CPA, a mother of two, and 3 weeks ago, my own father told 2,400 people that he was disowning me. He didn't call me first. He didn't sit me down. He wrote a Facebook post at 11 o'clock at night, and by the time I woke up the next morning, my in-laws had seen it. My children's teachers had seen it. The entire congregation at Grace Fellowship Church, all 800 members, had seen it. My phone didn't stop ringing for a week. My 8-year-old daughter came home from school crying because a classmate told her that her mommy got kicked out of her family. And the worst part? The post never said why. It just said I brought shame to the Braddock name and asked that no one contact me on their behalf. So the whole town filled in the blanks themselves. But here's the thing my father didn't know. While I was falling apart, my husband Marcus was sitting in our kitchen every night after I went to bed, quietly pulling public records. And what he found about a charity, a dead company, and $185,000 missing dollars, well, it changed everything. What Marcus did with that information at my father's own charity gala, even Dad never saw it coming. Before I go any further, if this story speaks to you, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what you hear. And while you're at it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and your local time. I'd love to know. Now let me take you back 5 weeks. To the Sunday afternoon, my mother asked me for a small favor. You need to understand Collinsville, North Carolina, to understand my father. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your last name before they know your first. Where who you sit with at church on Sunday says more about you than your tax return. And in Collinsville, the Braddock name, my maiden name, was currency. My father, Gerald Braddock, was senior vice president at First Regional Bank. He was a church elder at Grace Fellowship, this gorgeous old granite building with stained glass windows and a congregation of about 800. And for the past 15 years, he'd been the executive director of the Braddock Family Foundation, a 501c3 that gave scholarships to underprivileged teenagers. That last one was his crown jewel. Every year at the annual gala, he stood up in his Brooks Brothers suit, his Rolex date just catching the overhead light, and he talked about legacy and giving back until people cried. Then they wrote checks. He drove a black Cadillac Escalade that he always parked in the first spot at the church lot, not because it was reserved, but because nobody would dream of taking it. People called him Mr. Braddock even at the grocery store. He shook hands with both of his, the way politicians do, firm on the outside, deliberate underneath. And here's what you need to know about Gerald Braddock as a father. He believed in hierarchy. Men lead, women support. Sons carry the name forward. Daughters? Daughters were something he never quite figured out what to do with. Everyone in Collinsville believed Gerald Braddock was the finest man they knew, the most generous, the most principled. Everyone was wrong. I grew up in the shadow of a son my father always wished had come first. Tyler, my younger brother, is 29 now, 5 years behind me in age, a lifetime ahead of me in Dad's estimation. When Tyler graduated high school, average grades, no honors, Dad paid his full tuition at State for a business degree. When I graduated 2 years before him, summa cum laude, full academic load, part-time job at a tax office, Dad offered me a loan, not a gift. A loan, with interest, documented on paper. I paid off that student debt over 8 years, and I never once brought it up at family dinners. Not once. Tyler got a job at First Regional Bank right out of college, not because he earned it, because Dad made a call. He sat one cubicle over from Dad's corner office, and everyone on that floor knew exactly why he was there. Me? I passed the CPA exam on the first try. I got hired at Henderson and Shaw, a small accounting firm in town. When I told Dad over the phone, there was a pause, and then he said, "Accounting? That's just counting other people's money, sweetheart." When I married Marcus, a civil engineer at Morrison Engineering, steady, smart, devoted, Dad pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and said, "Well, at least you found someone willing." He said it like he was being generous. Marcus heard it. He didn't say anything that night. But I saw the way his jaw tightened around his Seiko watch strap when he took it off before bed. Still, I kept trying. I called Dad every Sunday. brought the kids to his house on holidays, helped set up chairs for church fundraisers. For 34 years, I tried to be the daughter he wanted. I didn't realize he never wanted a daughter at all. He wanted silence. It started with a phone call on a Sunday afternoon in early March. Mom, Diane, called me while I was folding laundry. Her voice was soft, the way it always got when Dad wasn't in the room. Wendy, honey, the gala's coming up in a few weeks, and I need to pull together the financial reports for the board. Could you come by and help me sort through some of the foundation files? You're so much better at this than I am. I said yes without thinking. That was my pattern. Mom asks, I show up. I drove over to the house that afternoon while Dad was at the golf course with his usual foursome. The Escalade wasn't in the driveway, and I remember feeling a small, stupid relief at that. Mom led me into Dad's home office, the inner sanctum, dark oak desk, leather chair, brass lamp, framed photos lining the shelves. One of them showed Dad shaking hands with the governor at some fundraiser. Another showed him receiving a Rotary Club award. The whole room smelled like furniture polish and self-importance. She handed me 2 file boxes and opened Dad's old laptop to an Excel file. These are the past 2 years of foundation expenses, she said. I just need everything organized so Mr. Kessler and the board can review it before the gala. I sat down and started going through the entries. Vendor payments, facility rentals, scholarship disbursements, printing costs, standard nonprofit stuff. Everything looked normal, clean, routine. And then my fingers stopped on the keyboard. There it was. One line among dozens. Meridian Consulting Group, $14,200. No contract reference, no project description, just consulting fee. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But something about the way that number sat there, too round, too clean, tucked between legitimate expenses like a forged signature hidden in a stack of real ones, made the CPA in me go very, very quiet. I told myself it was probably nothing. Dad had run the foundation for 15 years. Consultants come and go. Maybe Meridian did strategic planning, or donor outreach, or some other service I wasn't aware of. But then I scrolled further. Meridian Consulting Group, $8,600. March of the prior year. Same vague consulting fee description. No deliverables listed. I kept scrolling. Another one, $11,400. Then $6,200. Then $6,600. 6 payments across 2 years, totaling just over $47,000. All to the same vendor. All with the same generic label. I pulled up the records for other vendors, Kessler Printing, which did the gala programs, Collinsville Events Company, which handled catering. Both had line item breakdowns, quantities, unit costs, delivery dates, invoice numbers, normal, professional, everything you'd expect from a well-run charity. Meridian had none of that. It was the only vendor with no supporting documentation at all. I sat there for a moment, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. I could hear her humming something faintly. An old hymn, I think. I opened my phone and took screenshots of all 6 Meridian entries. I don't know why exactly. Professional instinct, maybe. Or maybe some part of me that had spent 11 years reconciling other people's books knew the difference between an oversight and a pattern. I told myself I'd ask Dad about it. Casually. Just to understand. After all, this was his foundation. His life's work. Surely there was a simple explanation. I didn't know that the screenshots I'd just taken would become the first piece of ammunition in a battle I hadn't yet realized I was fighting. I called Dad the next evening after putting the kids to bed. I kept my tone light, conversational. The way you do when you already know the answer might be a problem, but you're praying it won't be. Hey, Dad. So I was helping Mom organize the foundation files, and I noticed a few payments to a vendor called Meridian Consulting Group. I don't see a contract for them in the records. Can you fill me in? Just want to make sure everything's tidy before the board reviews. 3 seconds of silence. I counted. Then his voice came through, and it was the voice I'd been hearing my entire life whenever I stepped too close to something I wasn't supposed to touch. Cold. Controlled. When exactly did I ask you to audit my foundation, Wendy? You didn't, Dad. Mom asked me to organize the... I know what your mother asked, and I'm telling you right now, you are an accountant at a strip mall firm. Don't confuse that with being qualified to question my foundation. The words landed the way he meant them to, like a door slamming shut. I felt something small and familiar curl up in my chest. I was 8 years old again, standing at the edge of the dining room, being told to go play because the adults were talking. Don't touch those files again, he said. Give everything back to your mother, and do not discuss this with anyone. Are we clear? Yes, Dad. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, phone still warm in my hand. Marcus was brushing his teeth in the bathroom. He came out, looked at my face, and said nothing. He just sat down next to me. And then, faintly, just before I'd hung up, I'd heard Dad's voice shifting. Not talking to me anymore. Talking to someone else in the room. 3 words, clipped and urgent. We have a problem. Over the next 2 weeks, the temperature around me dropped. Slowly, then all at once. Tyler called first. His voice was different. Not the careless little brother tone I was used to, but something harder, borrowed. Dad told me you've been snooping through Foundation records. What exactly are you trying to do, Wendy? Destroy this family? I told him I wasn't snooping. I was doing what Mom had asked me to do. He cut me off. Just stay out of it, seriously. You don't understand how things work. Then Aunt Ruth, Dad's younger sister, canceled our Saturday lunch. She texted a single line. Something came up. Rain check? She never rescheduled. Mom was the one that scared me most. She stopped answering my calls. My texts went from warm to brief to nothing. Busy today. Talk later. Then just silence. I could see the read receipts. She was opening every message. She just wasn't replying. It took me a few days to understand what was happening. Dad was telling people his version first. I pieced it together from fragments. A cousin's awkward pause on the phone. A church friend who suddenly couldn't meet for coffee. Gerald Braddock was walking through his circle with a careful, wounded expression, telling anyone who'd listened that his eldest daughter was going through something, that she was paranoid, that he was worried about her. He wasn't angry, he was performing grief, and it was working. One night, after the kids were asleep, I told Marcus what I'd been noticing. The pulled-back invitations, the changed tones, the silence from my own mother. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I didn't fully appreciate at the time. Your dad's not upset, Wendy. He's strategic. There's a difference. He was right. But neither of us knew the strategy was only halfway done. 2 days later, Dad invited me to the house. Come by after work. We should talk. I went alone. Marcus offered to come, but something told me this was the kind of conversation Dad would only have without witnesses. The living room was staged like a courtroom. Dad sat in his armchair, leather, high-backed, positioned under the brass reading lamp like a throne. Tyler was on the sofa across from him, legs crossed, arms folded. The Tiffany lamp on the side table cast warm light across them both, turning everything golden and important-looking. Mom was nowhere in sight. I heard faint sounds from the kitchen, a cabinet closing, water running, but she didn't come out. On the mantel, the family portrait caught my eye, the one taken 3 Christmases ago. I noticed with a cold little jolt that it had been shifted, pushed to the far corner, half behind a candlestick. Dad didn't stand. He just looked at me. This is my family, he said. That foundation is my legacy. You will not say a single word about what you think you saw, to anyone, ever. He paused. Do you understand? Dad, if there's nothing wrong, then why? Because I said so. He leaned forward. I'm giving you an opportunity, Wendy. A last one. Tyler uncrossed his arms just long enough to add, Just drop it, Wendy. You're embarrassing yourself. I stood there for what felt like a full minute. Then I said something I hadn't planned. I didn't say I was going to tell anyone, Dad. I asked you a question. The fact that you can't answer it tells me everything. Nobody spoke. I turned around and walked out the front door. My hands shook the entire drive home. I gripped the steering wheel of my old Honda Accord so hard my knuckles went white. And I didn't know, I truly didn't know, that in 72 hours, my father would go nuclear. Monday morning, 6:45 a.m. I was pouring coffee, packing Emma's lunch, shouting at Noah to find his left shoe. Normal. Routine. The kind of morning you don't remember unless something explodes in the middle of it. My phone buzzed on the counter. Then again. Then again. I ignored it. Kids first. But when I finally picked it up at 7:15, I had 14 text messages, 6 missed calls, and a screenshot from my coworker Janet that made my vision go white at the edges. It was a Facebook post, from my father's personal page, written at 11:07 the night before. It is with deep sadness that Diane and I must share this publicly. We are officially disowning our eldest daughter, Wendy. She has brought profound shame to our family name. We ask that you do not contact her on our behalf, and we request privacy during this painful time. I read it 3 times. My hands were steady the first time, shaking by the third. The post had already been shared into the Grace Fellowship Church Community Group, 600 members, into the Collinsville Elementary Parent Group, where Emma's teachers and classmates' parents gathered to share bake sale schedules, into the Collinsville Community Forum, where half the town lurked. Tyler's name was on every share. He'd posted at midnight, 30 minutes after Dad. Within 12 hours, 2,400 views, 340 reactions, 89 comments. I scrolled through them with numb fingers, praying for the Braddock family. It takes courage to make this stand. So sorry, Gerald. Some children just don't appreciate what they're given. What did she do? That was the genius of it. He didn't say what I'd done. He left the accusation shapeless, and the town poured its worst assumptions into the mold. I could see the speculation forming in real time. Affair, drugs, theft. Nobody guessed the truth, because the truth was the one thing Gerald Braddock could not afford to have anyone ask about. 2,400 people. That's not a family disagreement. That's a public execution. And the executioner? He timed it for when I'd be too busy making school lunches to notice. The first call from the school came at 9 a.m. Mrs. Offield, this is Principal Davies. We wanted to let you know that a social media post has been brought to our attention by several parents. We're not making any judgments, of course, but we wanted to check in. Is everything safe at home for Emma and Noah? Safe. She was asking if my children were safe, because my father wrote a Facebook post. I said yes, everything was fine, my voice hollow enough that I'm sure she didn't believe me. But she let it go. For now. Emma came home that afternoon and went straight to her room. When I found her, she was sitting cross-legged on her bed, still wearing her backpack. Her eyes were red. "Mommy," she said, and her voice was so small. "Jake told everyone that Grandpa kicked you out of the family because you're a bad person. Am I a bad person too?" I held her. I couldn't speak for a while. Marcus's mother, Margaret, called that evening. She didn't mince words. "Marcus, I don't care what that man posted. Wendy is my daughter now, but you need to fix this. Whatever is happening, you fix it." At work, people were careful around me. Janet brought me coffee without being asked. My boss, Paul, called me into his office and closed the door. "Wendy, I don't want to get involved in family matters, but I have to be transparent. 2 clients mentioned the post this morning. They're asking questions." That night, I sat in our little 3-bedroom rental at the kitchen table under the overhead light, and I felt the walls close in. Not because of anger, because of something worse. The slow, suffocating realization that I had been publicly defined by a man who wouldn't even tell people what I'd done. My reputation was gone. 12 hours. That's all it took. But Marcus? Marcus was already counting backward from something I couldn't see yet. For the next several days, my world got smaller. I called Mom 6 times. No answer. I texted, "Mom, please call me. I don't understand what's happening." Read, no reply. The next morning, "I love you, please." Read, nothing. Then Dad posted again, not a statement this time, a family photo. Him, Mom, Tyler, Tyler's girlfriend. Sunday brunch at the country club. Linen napkins, mimosas, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Caption, "Family is everything. Hold your loved ones close." I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been invited. 800 likes. One by one, familiar faces drifted away. 3 women from my small group at church unfriended me on Facebook. I noticed because their names vanished from my birthday list. A neighbor I'd exchanged cookies with every Christmas for 5 years nodded at me across the produce aisle and kept walking. My phone, which had rung non-stop for 3 days, went quiet in a different way now. The silence of people who've decided you're not worth the awkwardness. I tried once to defend myself. I left a comment on Dad's original post. "Dad, can we please talk about this privately? I don't understand why—" He deleted it in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Which meant he was watching. Tyler called me one last time that week. "You brought this on yourself, Wendy. Dad gave you a chance and you chose to be difficult. Don't call Mom again. She doesn't want to hear from you." I sat in my car outside the grocery store for 20 minutes that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel, crying so hard my chest hurt. And I thought, maybe Tyler's right. Maybe this is what I deserve for asking a question no one wanted answered. But then I noticed something. Mom's text messages. She'd read every single one. Every one. She wasn't ignoring me by choice. She was being watched. The following Sunday, Gerald Braddock stood up during the prayer request portion of the service at Grace Fellowship Church. I wasn't there. But Marcus was. He hadn't told me he was going. He put on a clean button-down, drove his Ford F-150 to the Granite Church on Elm Street, and sat in the last pew on the left, close to the exit, where he could see everything without being noticed. 400 people were in that sanctuary, stained glass throwing colored light across oak pews. The choir had just finished "How Great Thou Art." And then Pastor David Whitmore opened the floor for prayer requests, and my father stood. Marcus told me later that Dad's voice trembled. Not a lot. Just enough. Rehearsed enough to sound unrehearsed. "I'd like to ask the congregation to keep the Braddock family in your prayers," he said. "We're going through the most painful chapter of our lives. When a child chooses a path that wounds the family, it's something no parent is prepared for." He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Marcus watched from the back as people rose from their seats to embrace Dad. One by one, hands on his shoulders, soft voices. Pastor Whitmore himself placed a palm on Dad's back and said, "We're with you, Gerald." 400 people comforting the man who had publicly destroyed his own daughter. Marcus sat very still through all of it. He didn't react. He didn't confront anyone. He just watched. And he thought. And what he thought was this: a man who is telling the truth doesn't need to perform grief in front of 400 people. A man who is telling the truth doesn't delete his daughter's comments in 3 minutes. A man who is telling the truth doesn't go nuclear when she asks about a consulting invoice. Something was built on bad ground here. And Marcus, a man who'd spent 15 years pouring concrete foundations, knew exactly what that looked like. I need to pause here for a moment. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, there's no way a father would do that to his own child, well, stay with me, because what my husband discovered next changed everything. If you're connecting with this story, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to hear what Gerald Braddock was really hiding behind that Facebook post, subscribe now. Trust me on this one. All right, let me take you back to my kitchen table. 10 days after the post, I was a shell of myself. I'd lost 8 pounds. My sleep came in 90-minute fragments, broken by the phantom buzz of a phone that had mostly stopped ringing. At work, I moved through spreadsheets on autopilot. My fingers knew the formulas even when my brain was somewhere else entirely. One evening, I sat at our kitchen table, that IKEA table Marcus and I had assembled the week we moved in, the one with the wobbly leg we kept meaning to fix, and I held a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Through the back window, I could see Emma and Noah chasing each other around the swing set, laughing, oblivious. Thank God for that. And I thought, maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I should call Dad and apologize, tell him I overstepped. Promise to never mention Meridian or the foundation again. Get my family back. Get my name back. Let my children have a grandfather who actually shows up to their school plays. Was being right really worth all of this? When Marcus came home, I told him, maybe I should just apologize. Get things back to normal. He set his hard hat on the counter and looked at me for a long time. No frustration, no judgment. Just that steady, quiet gaze that made me fall in love with him 10 years ago. "Wendy," he said, "let me ask you something. If your dad had nothing to hide, why did he burn down your reputation in front of 2,400 people instead of just having a conversation?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Peace built on a lie isn't peace, he said. It's a cage. That night, after I went to bed, Marcus stayed up. I heard the faint click of his laptop opening in the living room. He typed one word into the search bar: Meridian. Marcus didn't rush. That's not who he is. He's the kind of man who measures twice, cuts once, and then measures again just to be sure. So he started with me. The next night, after the kids went down, he sat across from me at that same IKEA table and said, "Tell me about growing up with your dad. Not the finances. Him." So I told him. Things I'd never said out loud in a row before. How I won first place at the state math competition in 9th grade, and Dad didn't come. Tyler had a rec league soccer game the same afternoon. Dad sat in the front row. How the night I found out I'd been accepted into the CPA program, I called home bursting, and Dad said, "Well, who's going to cook for you?" How at our wedding reception he stood up with a champagne glass and told 150 people, well, at least she found someone willing. Like it was a joke, like I should be grateful anyone wanted me. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator humming. Then he said, "You know why your dad is scared of you, right?" I almost laughed. Scared? Of me? You're the only person in that family who can read a spreadsheet, Wendy. You're the only one who could catch him. He paused. Then, I found something tonight. Meridian Consulting Group was dissolved with the state of North Carolina 2 years ago. The company doesn't exist anymore. But the foundation was still cutting checks to Meridian as recently as last month. The weight on my chest, the one that had been sitting there for 10 days, didn't disappear. But for the first time it shifted. While Marcus was pulling threads, Gerald Braddock was winning. He hosted a small dinner at the house the following weekend. 20 people, hand-selected. The Mook Sioux, 2 church elders, a couple of bank colleagues, Aunt Ruth. The kind of evening where wine flows and sympathy thickens. Word trickled back to me through the cracks. Someone who told Janet at work that Dad was recovering, that he was putting the family back together, that everyone admired his strength. Meanwhile, I went to the grocery store and ran into Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor of 5 years, the one I'd baked apple crumble for every December. She saw me from 10 feet away, and I watched her face do this tiny, almost imperceptible thing. A flinch, followed by a polite nod, followed by a shopping cart swerving down the next aisle. At Henderson and Shaw, Paul pulled me aside again. "Wendy, I'm not suggesting anything, but maybe take a few personal days, just until things settle." I stood in the parking lot after that conversation, late afternoon sun slanting across the asphalt, and I felt small, physically small. Like the town was a room that kept shrinking, and I was the only one who couldn't find the door. Gerald Braddock believed he had won. The town believed he had won. The church believed he had won. Tyler certainly believed he had won. He'd posted a photo of himself and Dad at the golf course that morning, captioned, "Best mentor a guy could ask for." But in my kitchen that night, at an IKEA table with a wobbly leg, my husband was arranging printouts in 3 neat stacks. Public filings from the IRS, business records from the North Carolina Secretary of State, screenshots I'd taken 5 weeks earlier on a Sunday afternoon. He looked up at me and said quietly, "We have enough to ask the right questions. Now we need the right people to hear them." Here's something most people don't know. If you run a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States, your IRS Form 990 is a public document. Anyone can look it up. It's available on sites like ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer, free, searchable, and completely legal to access. Marcus found the Braddock Family Foundation's filings in about 4 minutes. He pulled the last 5 years of 990s and started reading. Not the way a casual person would, skimming the mission statement and the big numbers. He read the way I would have, line by line, vendor by vendor. He cross-referenced every payee against the North Carolina Secretary of State's business entity database, which is also public, also free. Meridian Consulting Group, dissolved in 2023. Last active filing 3 years ago. No registered agent. No office address on record. Yet the foundation had paid them $47,000 over 2 years, including 2 payments after the company ceased to exist, But Meridian wasn't alone. Marcus found 2 more vendors with the same fingerprint. Summit Advisory, LLC, $58,000 across 3 years, dissolved 18 months ago. Pinnacle Services Group, $80,400 over 4 years, registered to a P.O. box that also appeared on no other business filing in the state. 3 shell vendors, $185,400, all with the same generic consulting fee description. All signed off by a single person. Every check, every single one, carried only one signature: Gerald W. Braddock. The Foundation's bylaws, available in the 990 attachments, required 2 signatures for any disbursement over $5,000. Dad had been signing a loan for 5 years, and either nobody on the board noticed or nobody dared ask. Marcus sat back in his chair at midnight, his Seiko glinting under the kitchen light, and said to no one in particular, "Your dad's been paying dead companies for 2 years. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern." The next piece came from a name buried in an old 990. Marcus was scrolling through the Foundation's board listings year by year when he noticed something. A woman named Linda Calloway had served on the board for 6 years, and then vanished from the roster 2 years ago. No explanation, no farewell note. She was there in one filing and gone in the next. He found her on LinkedIn, property manager in a town 30 minutes south of Collinsville. He sent a message that was pure Marcus, polite, direct, and devastatingly honest. "Miss Calloway, my name is Marcus Offield. I'm married to Wendy Braddock. Her father recently disowned her publicly on social media. I'm trying to understand why. I believe it may be connected to the Foundation's finances. Would you be willing to speak with me?" She replied within the hour. They met at a diner off the interstate, far enough from Collinsville that no one would see. Linda was in her early 50s, composed, careful with her words. She ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. "I started asking questions 2 years ago," she said, "about vendor payments that didn't make sense. I brought it up at a board meeting and Gerald looked at me like I'd set fire to the church. After that, he started calling the other board members individually. Within a month, I got a phone call, Gerald himself, telling me it would be best for everyone if I stepped down." She had the email he'd sent her. She'd kept it for 2 years. Marcus asked her why she hadn't reported it. She looked down at her untouched coffee. "Because Gerald Braddock runs this town, and I have a business here. He erased me from that board like I never existed." Then she looked up. "But when I saw that Facebook post about Wendy, I knew he was doing it again, erasing someone who got too close." She paused. "There's one more person who knows, but I don't know if she'd ever speak up." Marcus already knew who she meant. 3 days after Marcus met with Linda, he walked out to our mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon and found a manila envelope with no return address. Inside, a USB flash drive, and a single handwritten note on plain white paper, in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. The same loops, the same careful slant that had written my name on every birthday card for 34 years. "He keeps this in the locked drawer. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. D. Mom." Marcus plugged the USB into his laptop. It contained one file, an Excel spreadsheet. Gerald's personal financial tracking, the one he kept separate from the Foundation's official books, and it laid everything bare, every withdrawal from the Foundation account, every transfer to his personal checking through the shell vendors, dates, amounts, routing numbers, 5 years of clean, meticulous theft, total $185,400. And in the margin notes, the kind of annotations someone makes when they think no one will ever see, one entry read, "Tyler apartment, $2,400 per month." My father had been paying my brother's rent with scholarship money meant for underprivileged teenagers. Marcus called me into the kitchen. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at the note. Then I looked at the handwriting. And I cried. Not because of the numbers, because of my mother. Diane Braddock, who had spent 36 years deferring to her husband, who had stopped answering my calls, who had sat in that kitchen while Gerald issued ultimatums in the living room, had waited until the house was empty, opened the locked drawer with a key she wasn't supposed to have, copied the file, and mailed it to us. Without a word, without a phone call, just a USB drive and 7 words of apology. 36 years of silence. And she chose me. "We have everything now," Marcus said quietly. I wiped my eyes. So what do we do with it? We sat at the kitchen table that night, the same table where I'd almost given up, where Marcus had searched for Meridian, where the printouts had piled up stack by stack, and we made a plan. The Braddock Family Foundation's annual gala was 2 weeks away. 300 guests, donors, bankers, church leaders, local business owners, a city councilwoman. Gerald would be there in his Brooks Brothers suit, accepting the Founders Award he'd created for himself, shaking hands with the same people whose money he'd been siphoning for half a decade. More importantly, 3 specific people would be in that room. Robert Kessler, the board chairman and a practicing attorney, Pastor David Whitmore, and Helen Travers, the compliance officer at First Regional Bank, which was the foundation's largest institutional donor. Marcus's plan was simple, elegant even. We would not make a scene. We would not give a speech. We would not post on Facebook. We would walk into that gala, hand each of those 3 people a folder, and leave. 3 folders. Same contents. Printed 990 filings, Secretary of State dissolution records, the screenshots I'd taken, Linda Calloway's signed statement with the email Gerald sent pressuring her to resign, and a cover letter requesting an independent review of the foundation's finances. Let them decide. Let the evidence do the talking. I agreed, but I drew a line. I'm not turning this into a revenge show, Marcus. I don't want to humiliate my father in front of 300 people. I just want the truth to have an address. Marcus put his hand over mine. We're not going to humiliate him, Wendy. We're going to give the people who trust him the information they deserve. What happens after that, that's on him. I looked at the stacks of paper. Let the documents do the talking. The documents, Marcus said, don't know how to lie. Marcus printed 3 identical dossiers at the FedEx office in the next town over. He used their self-service printers, paid cash, and didn't make small talk. Each folder contained 5 years of IRS, Form 990 filings with the Shell vendor payments highlighted, North Carolina Secretary of State dissolution records for Meridian Consulting Group, Summit Advisory LLC, and Pinnacle Services Group. My original screenshots from the Foundation's internal books, Linda Calloway's signed written statement, along with the email from Gerald pressuring her resignation, a copy of Gerald's personal spreadsheet from the USB, and a 1-page cover letter addressed to whom it may concern, requesting an independent financial review. The cover letter was Marcus's work. No accusations, no adjectives, just facts and a request. 312 words of the most devastating politeness I'd ever read. I went through every page myself, twice, checked the math, confirmed the dates, cross-referenced the entity numbers. The CPA in me wanted it bulletproof, and it was. The night before the gala, Marcus set the 3 manila envelopes on the kitchen table, side by side, neat, labeled, board chair, pastor, compliance. I stood in the doorway and looked at them. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, I said. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from something I hadn't felt in 5 weeks. Something unfamiliar and electric that I finally recognized around 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my father's permission to exist. Quick question for you. If you were me, standing in that kitchen looking at those 3 envelopes, would you go through with it? Or would you handle it differently? I'm genuinely curious. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've been listening this far and you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because what happened at that gala? It's the part of this story I've been waiting to tell you since the beginning. All right, let's go. The Braddock Family Foundation annual gala was held at the Collinsville Country Club, a white columned building overlooking the 7th fairway, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a chandelier in the foyer that probably cost more than my car. 300 guests, women in cocktail dresses and statement jewelry, men in dark suits holding whiskey neat. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the bar. The tables were draped in white linen, topped with arrangements of white peonies and flickering tea lights. A banner hung across the main wall in navy and gold. 15 years of changing young lives, the Braddock Family Foundation. At the center of it all was my father. Navy suit, crisp white shirt, Rolex catching the chandelier light with every handshake. He moved through the crowd like he owned the room, because in a very real sense, he did. Every donor there had written a check to his foundation. Every church member there had prayed for him last Sunday. Gerald Braddock, in this room, at this moment, was untouchable. Tyler stood beside him in a charcoal suit, playing the dutiful son, smiling, nodding, refilling Dad's sparkling water. Mom was at the VIP table in a black dress, hands folded in her lap, face carefully neutral. Pastor Whitmore was there, seated at the head table. Helen Travers from First Regional's Compliance Department was there too. The bank was the gala's biggest sponsor. Robert Kessler, the board chairman, a silver-haired attorney with gold-rimmed glasses, was nursing a bourbon near the podium. Marcus and I arrived at 7:45. We didn't have tickets. Marcus parked the F-150 at the far end of the lot, away from the Escalades and the BMWs. He wore a clean white button-down and pressed chinos. I wore a simple navy dress, not designer, not meant to impress, just meant to say, I belong here. Marcus carried a leather bag with 3 manila envelopes inside. We walked through the front doors, and nobody stopped us. In a room full of people who'd read my father's Facebook post, nobody recognized the disowned daughter. Or maybe they just didn't expect her to show up. The MC, a local radio personality with a booming voice and a tuxedo, stepped up to the podium at 8:15. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce a man who has dedicated his life to the young people of this community. The crowd clapped. Dad rose from his seat, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the podium the way he walked everywhere, like the room had been built around him. He gripped the edges of the lectern, swept his gaze across 300 faces, and began. He thanked the donors. He thanked the board. He told a story about a girl named Keisha who'd received the foundation's first scholarship 15 years ago and was now a registered nurse at Duke. His voice caught when he said her name. Just a little, just enough. The crowd leaned in. Our family has given everything to this mission, he said. And recently, as some of you know, we've faced personal losses that I won't pretend haven't been devastating. A pause, a breath. The Rolex glinted. But the work continues, because legacy is not about what happens to you. It's about what you build that outlasts any one person. 300 people stood and applauded. Tyler was on his feet first, clapping with his hands above his shoulders. The MC presented Gerald with the Founders Award, a crystal trophy, heavy and gleaming, etched with his name. He held it up. The chandelier caught it and threw light across the room like a halo. I was standing at the back, near the hallway that led to the restrooms and the service entrance. Marcus was beside me. I could feel his heartbeat through his sleeve where our arms touched. I watched my mother at the VIP table. She was clapping, but her hands, I could see them even from 40 feet away, her hands were shaking. That was the moment Gerald Braddock stood tallest, crystal in his hand. 300 people on their feet, the golden pinnacle of a lifetime spent building an image. It was also the last. Marcus waited for the applause to die and the cocktail hour to begin. He didn't hurry. He never hurries. As the crowd broke into clusters and the bartenders started pouring, Marcus walked across the room with the leather bag at his side. He didn't weave or dodge. He walked in a straight line, the way he walks a job site, deliberate, unhurried, absolutely certain of where he's going. His first stop was Robert Kessler. The board chairman was standing near the podium, bourbon in hand, talking to a woman in pearls. Marcus waited for a natural pause, then extended his hand. Mr. Kessler, my name is Marcus Offield. I apologize for the interruption, and I'll only need 2 minutes of your time. This envelope contains information about the financial management of the Braddock Family Foundation. I'm not asking you to believe anything tonight. I'm asking you to read the documents. Kessler took the envelope. His expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on it. Next, Pastor Whitmore, seated at the head table, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. Marcus leaned down and spoke quietly. Pastor, forgive me for not making an appointment, but I believe you'll want to see this before the evening ends. It concerns the foundation, and the trust this congregation has placed in it. Whitmore accepted the envelope with both hands, the way he accepted offering plates on Sundays. Finally, Helen Travers, standing near the bar in a tailored gray suit. Marcus approached her with the third envelope and said, Ms. Travers, what's inside here relates to a senior officer at your bank. I believe your compliance team will consider it relevant. Helen looked at the envelope, then at Marcus. She didn't take a sip of her wine. She took the folder. 3 envelopes, 90 seconds. No raised voice, no accusations, no scene. From across the room, I saw my father notice. His head turned. He saw Marcus talking to Helen Travers. Then he looked at Kessler, who was already opening his envelope. Then at Whitmore, who was reading the cover letter with his glasses pulled low. Gerald set down his crystal trophy and started walking. But it was already done. Gerald intercepted Marcus near the dessert table, where the catering staff was arranging petite fours on a silver tray. He grabbed Marcus's arm, not hard enough to make a scene, but hard enough that Marcus felt it. His smile was still on, but his eyes had gone flat. The Rolex flashed as he leaned in. "What do you think you're doing here?" he hissed. "This is a private event." Marcus didn't pull away. "It's a charity gala, Mr. Braddock, open to the community. I thought the people in this room might want to know where their donations went." Gerald's jaw tightened. "You are a bridge builder, a manual laborer. My daughter made the mistake of marrying beneath her, and now you're $185,000, Mr. Braddock." Marcus's voice was level, almost gentle. Meridian Consulting Group was dissolved 2 years ago. The foundation kept paying them. Summit Advisory, same thing. Pinnacle Services, same. All the checks signed by you alone, in violation of the foundation's own dual signature requirement. For the first time in my life, I watched my father have nothing to say. His mouth opened, closed. The color drained from his face in stages, starting at the forehead. "That's a lie," he finally managed. "My daughter fed you paranoid. The IRS, Form 990, is a public record, sir. I didn't need anyone to feed me anything." Robert Kessler appeared at Gerald's elbow. He wasn't smiling. "Gerald, I think we should step into the back room. Now." Dad tried. "Robert, this is a family misunderstanding. The documents suggest otherwise." Kessler's voice was quiet and final. "Helen Travers is already on the phone with your bank's general counsel." Nearby, Tyler had gone pale. I could see him from where I stood, motionless, a champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips. He knew. If they pulled the thread on Gerald's spreadsheet, they'd find the line that read, "Tyler Apt, $2,400 per month." And there would be no explaining that away. The back room was a private dining space off the main hall. Burgundy carpet, mahogany table, a painting of some fox hunt on the wall. The kind of room where country club members settle estate disputes over sherry. That night, it was where Gerald Braddock's world collapsed. Kessler laid the documents across the table, all of them. The 990s with highlighted vendor payments, the dissolution filings, the screenshots, Linda Calloway's statement, Gerald's personal spreadsheet. Helen Travers stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in low, rapid tones to what I later learned was First Regional's general counsel. Pastor Whitmore sat at the head of the table, reading the cover letter with both hands pressed flat on the wood like he was trying to keep the room from spinning. Gerald tried. "These are clerical errors, bookkeeping inconsistencies. I can explain every single—" "Mr. Braddock," Helen said, lowering her phone. "The check for $14,200 issued to Meridian last March bears only your signature. Your foundation's bylaws require dual authorization for any amount exceeding $5,000. Do you have a cosigner?" Silence. Kessler tapped one of the spreadsheet printouts. "And this notation, Tyler apartment $2,400 a month. Gerald, your son's rent has been paid from the foundation account." Tyler, who had followed them in, jerked upright. I didn't know where the money—" "Shut up, Tyler." Gerald's voice cracked. First time all evening. First time I'd ever heard it crack, actually. The room went still. Pastor Whitmore removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Gerald, those scholarships. That money was for children, kids who had nothing. And you—" He couldn't finish. Gerald stood alone at the end of that mahogany table, stripped of every prop that had ever protected him. No podium, no applause, no script. Just 5 people staring at numbers that didn't lie. Outside, in the main hall, the string quartet played on, but murmurs were spreading. Guests had noticed Kessler's abrupt departure. They'd seen Helen Travers making urgent calls. The banner reading 15 years of changing young lives hung overhead like an indictment. The dominoes didn't fall all at once. They fell in sequence, each one heavier than the last. That night, at the gala, Kessler announced to the board members present that Gerald was immediately suspended as executive director. The foundation's bank accounts were frozen pending an independent audit. The Crystal Founders Award sat uncollected on the podium table for the rest of the evening. Within 48 hours, Helen Travers had filed a formal report with First Regional's general counsel. A senior vice president running a personal embezzlement scheme through a charity he directed, while employed at the bank that was the charity's biggest donor, represented a compliance liability the bank could not absorb. Gerald was placed on administrative leave, then terminated. 31 years at First Regional, gone in a single HR meeting. 1 week later, Pastor Whitmore convened an emergency session of the Elder Board at Grace Fellowship. The vote was 7-1 to remove Gerald from his position as church elder. The single abstention came from Gerald's golf partner, who didn't vote against him but couldn't bring himself to vote for him either. The North Carolina Attorney General's office received the dossier via certified mail. Marcus sent it the morning after the gala. Within 3 weeks, the AG's Public Integrity Unit opened a formal investigation into the Braddock Family Foundation. Tyler was quietly flagged by First Regional's internal review when auditors traced the Tyler Apt payments. He was reassigned to a back-office role and placed on a performance improvement plan, the corporate equivalent of being put in a corner. And the Facebook post, the one that started all of this? It was still up. Gerald never deleted it, but now, when people shared it, the commentary had changed. It was no longer evidence of a wayward daughter. It was evidence of a guilty man trying to silence the one person who could expose him. I didn't take anything from my father. The documents did. I just made sure they found the right hands. 10 days after the gala, my phone rang. The caller ID said Dad. I almost didn't answer. Marcus was in the kitchen with the kids. He looked at me. I looked at the screen. Then I picked up. Are you satisfied now? His voice was different, thinner, like someone had let the air out of it. You've destroyed everything I built. Everything. You destroyed it, Dad. I just asked a question. You were always the difficult one, Wendy. Always pushing. Always needing to prove you were smarter than everyone else. If you just kept your mouth shut. If I'd kept my mouth shut, you'd still be stealing scholarship money from teenagers. Silence. A long one. I sacrificed everything for this family, he said, and I could hear him reaching for the old script. The patriarch, the provider, the man who carried the weight. But the words sounded hollow now. Like lines from a play he'd been performing so long he forgot it wasn't real. No, Dad, you sacrificed everything for yourself. The family was just the stage. More silence. I'm not going to call again, I said. And I meant it. Not from hatred. I was surprised to find I didn't hate him. From something quieter than that. I can't keep loving someone who treats my silence as the price of belonging. He started to say something, maybe an argument, maybe an apology, though I doubt it. But I'd already taken the phone away from my ear. I hung up, and I didn't cry. For the first time in 34 years, after a conversation with my father, I did not cry. I set the phone down on the counter, walked to the kitchen, sat between my children, and helped Noah color a picture of a dinosaur. The dinosaur was purple. Noah insisted. I thought that was exactly right. The apologies came in slowly, like people wading back into water they'd left too quickly. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who'd swerved her cart, showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with a loaf of banana bread and red-rimmed eyes. Wendy, I am so sorry. I should have asked you what happened before I believed him. I was a coward, and you deserved better. I thanked her. I meant it. I also didn't pretend it was nothing, because it wasn't. Paul, my boss, called me into his office, same closed door. But this time he said, I owe you an apology, and the partners have been talking. We'd like to promote you to senior accountant. You've earned it several times over. Pastor Whitmore sent a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, on church stationery. I failed you, Wendy. I stood in that pulpit and I prayed for the wrong person. I cannot undo that. But I can tell you that the foundation is being restructured under a new board, and I would be honored if you would consider joining it. Emma came home from school one afternoon with a grin so wide it split her face. Mommy, Jake said sorry. He said his mom told him you're actually really brave and he should never have said those things. He wants to come to my birthday party. I knelt down and hugged her so tight she giggled and said, Mom, you're squishing me. And then there was Mom. She called on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was fragile but clear, clearer than I'd heard it in months. I'm sorry, Wendy. I should have been stronger a long time ago. Mom, you were strong. That USB drive, after 36 years of silence, you chose to act. That was the bravest thing anyone in this family has ever done. She cried. I cried. It was the good kind. People started calling me brave. But I wasn't brave. I was cornered. Bravery was my mother, slipping that USB into an envelope after 36 years of keeping the peace. 2 months later, Collinsville looked different. Or maybe I just saw it differently. Gerald sold the Escalade. I heard it through the grapevine. He needed the cash for legal fees. His attorney was managing communications with the AG's office, where the investigation was still active and ongoing. The Rolex disappeared from his wrist. I don't know if he sold it or just couldn't stand to wear it anymore. Tyler left town, moved to Charlotte, didn't tell anyone. His social media went dark. No more golf course photos, no more best mentor captions. The last I heard, he was working at a regional insurance company and not speaking to Dad. Mom filed for legal separation in April. She moved in with her sister, Aunt Helen, in a little ranch house with a garden out back. For the first time in her adult life, she opened a bank account in her own name. She called me every few days now. Real calls, long ones, about nothing in particular. About everything. The Braddock Family Foundation was placed under new leadership. A 5-person board with no Braddocks on it. The misappropriated funds were being pursued through legal channels. It would take time. But the scholarships would continue. The kids who needed them would still get them. Pastor Whitmore asked me to join the new board. I declined gently. I think the foundation needs faces that don't carry the Braddock name, I told him. But thank you. Truly. Life wasn't perfect. It never is after something breaks this badly. Some relationships didn't survive. Some trust couldn't be rebuilt. But Marcus still got up at 5:30, put on his hard hat, and went to work. He still wore that Seiko. Emma still did cartwheels in the backyard. Noah still insisted every dinosaur be purple. And our kitchen table, the IKEA one, with the wobbly leg, it was clean now. No folders, no printouts, no envelopes, just 2 coffee mugs and a crayon drawing of a brontosaurus. It's not mahogany. It doesn't have a locked drawer. But it held the truth when it mattered. And that's enough. Before I let you go, here are 3 things this story taught me. Not as advice, just as things I wish someone had told me 5 weeks earlier. First, silence isn't loyalty. I spent 34 years keeping quiet because I thought that was what good daughters did. It wasn't. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to protect their lies. Second, if someone destroys your reputation in public instead of having a conversation in private, ask yourself what they're protecting. Public shaming is the weapon of someone who knows they can't win behind closed doors. My father didn't post on Facebook because I'd shamed the family. He posted because I'd seen a spreadsheet. Third, you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to scream or curse or make a scene. You just need the right documents and the right moment, and a husband who knows how to read a 990 form. Thank you for listening to the end. Seriously, thank you. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been silenced by someone who was supposed to protect you, or if you've ever been afraid to speak up because the cost felt too high, I want you to know you're not alone, and the cost of staying silent is always higher in the end. Hit like if this resonated. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And drop a comment. I'd love to know. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone in your family? What happened? Your stories matter. I read everyone. And if you're looking for more, check the description below. There are other stories waiting for you. Take care of yourselves. I mean that. Wendy.